Hey painters, it's another great day to paint and we're moving right along on our bowl of fruit. Today we're going to paint the apples. I'm excited about painting them, so let's get started. Well, you can see that I have finished up a couple of leaves so that they'll sit behind the apple. I've also put the first layer on the apple so that could be drying so I can do the second layer. There's a couple of important things about apples that you need to remember. It is a little more difficult to do the apples, and so we need just as many tips as we can possibly get. One of the things that you have to remember, of course, as usual, is that there are many layers. So the first layer, and you can see it here, it does not look very well done. We've got a long ways to go, but we've just started getting color on. The second thing to remember is that you want to keep moving your brush in the shape of the apple. And let me just demonstrate on this other apple. You want to use your brush so that it curves with the apple here, curving more straight, 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 curving here. Then you also want to curve from this shoulder of the apple down into the dip, curve straight, straight, and then if the grape wasn't there, you would curve it this way. So you want to make sure that you're always working your brush with the shape of the apple so that it eventually will look round. When you have a hidden apple, like this one, you want to keep your eye on, keep your mind's eye on what this apple would look like if it was not hidden behind some of the grapes and the other apple. So you have to keep in mind that this apple would be more or less round, and so your strokes then would go this way, straight, straight, curve, curve. You don't want to be stroking across the apple this way, because that's going to throw your apple completely out of kilter and it won't look round. I'm going to use a medium-sized oval blender, probably an 8. Also, when you're doing apples, it's helpful sometimes to use two brushes, because the colors red and yellow, when they get mixed up a lot on your brush, they're going to turn orange. And just using two brushes kind of helps you so that you don't have to wash your brush quite so frequently. It doesn't matter if they're the same size. I've got a 6 and an 8, so I'll use the 8 for my yellow. I'm going to be working with yellow oxide and with naphthol red light. So I'm going to follow the diagram of my photograph, and I'm going to lay this yellow on where I can see it in the photo. Remember that as you go along, this can always be changed. It's not in stone yet. So we're just going to lay on, and this isn't super thick, but I'm not trying to stretch it out thin either. This first step is just kind of to get your brain thinking about where the colors are going to go and how they're going to blend. It's kind of opening up your mind's eye so that you can see what it is you're trying to accomplish. I'm going to switch to my other brush now, pick up my naphthol red light. I'm going to place that boldly where I know I want it, brush it on, and kind of move it out into the yellow a little bit. I'm just using my brush slightly damp. I don't have any kind of medium in it. It's just slightly damp with water. When I touch it, it doesn't make my fingers wet. But there is just a little bit of water in it, which you get it wet and then blot it out. So you can see that I don't have a lot of paint on my brush, and I'm kind of whisking this on because I want what I'm trying to do is to dry brush these two colors together. So that can be my first application. Now once that's dry, we'll do a second application of the same colors the same way. And I'm going to do that on this apple because it's already nice and dry. Putting the yellow right exactly where I want it. And blending it into the red. And now I'm going to pick up my red and I'm going to do a little bit more of a dry brushing. I don't have a lot of paint on the brush. Now normally you wouldn't have this other apple started, so you wouldn't worry too much about whether you got some color over there in that area where that apple sits. This apple that's in the background here, more receding, does not have as much red on it. The apple that's in the foreground here has quite a bit more red. But we can start with a little more red than what we want to end up with, because we need to have some places where that red blends into the yellow. So now I'm back to my yellow and I'm just going to gently dry brush now, always following the curve of the apple. And I'm just dry brushing the yellow into the red, and you can see that it's starting to create a little bit of a streaked look. Then we're going to let that dry, and I'm going to use my round blender, a 6 or an 8, somewhere in there, and I'm going to use my #1 green mix. I'm going to do a dry rub, so I'm going to work that paint into my brush and then blot it out. Now any place where I want to create green, I'm going to lay the brush down. Remember that in the video it always looks like the brush is standing up, but it's not. You can see from my fingers how far back I am that the brush is laying down. And I'm going to gently introduce this green color into the yellow areas. I'm not going to avoid the red areas, but I basically want to color my yellow areas a little bit more green. The apples have many steps. Take it slow. Take one little application at a time. Don't get in a hurry. Okay, now I want to use a small round blender. I'm going to use a #2. And I'm going to take my dark red mix. And you can check your instructions for dark red. And I want to put a lot of, I don't want a lot of paint on the tip, but most of the paint goes on the tip. So I want to scoop it up onto the tip of the brush, and now I just want to create some streaks in here. So I can see that I've got some streaky look here, and I want to streak some up into the yellow area as well. Just kind of not really dry brushing, more of a tap and drag, so that you get some fat and skinny places. It's not really dry brushing. Set the brush down and kind of drag it. The back apple back in here that we're working on doesn't have quite as many streaks as that forward apple, but we can start out with a few and then they'll go away as we go along. Okay, now I want to do a little bit of shading on there, so I'm going to go back to a round blender, maybe a 6, and my dark red, or I think it's called deep red, and I'm going to put this down here where the apple falls behind the pear and behind the other apple, and I'm doing a dry rub. So I'm going to do a little bit of that. Okay, now I'm going back to my yellow oxide on my oval, or you could use your round brush, either one, and just continue building. Remember, if your paint does something you don't want it to do, then you need to blot your brush and come back and try it again. You always want to be in control. You don't want the paint to control you. So I've got my yellow, and I'm creating a little bit larger space of yellow than what I had originally put on here. But I think I'm kind of liking the way it's going. Now you can rest assured that yellow is not going to completely erase red. So don't be afraid to drag and pull some of this yellow over some of your red areas. Now, from now on, it's kind of repeating what we've already done. So I'm going to pick up again a little bit of green #1, move that into my round blender so that I can do a little dry rubbing. And I'm barely touching it, just to dry rub a little bit of green on. And then I'm going to switch, and I'm going to work from now in that yellow area. I want to work on dry rubbing instead of streaking, because I want to create kind of a rounded area. So I'm loading my medium-sized round blender with the yellow for a dry rub, and I'm going to come in here and make this area nice and round. I want to create a kind of a green area back there. We want to see on the apple some places that look kind of greenish yellow and some places that look just yellow. So you're going to go back and forth, putting on yellow and putting on green. This area right in here where the stem comes out, we'll deal with that on a separate little issue. Right now I'm just getting that nice and bright right there in the middle. I'm going to stick with my yellow oxide, and now I want to pull a little bit of yellow oxide down in here to where the stem is. And I've got the yellow on the tip of the brush, and I'm just pushing it downward. Blot your brush, lay the paint down, blot your brush, and then blend it. Now you can see it's starting to look like there's a dip there for the stem. I'm going to go to a little bit smaller round blender, and I want to have some pretty dark color there. I'm going to pick up some burnt umber and some green mix number 4, I think. And we want to create, I'm going to do a dry rub with this. I want to create just a little bit more darkness right in here to show depth to that apple. And from the inside of that stem and coming out onto the apple is just a little bit of dark brownish green color. And I'm just playing around with it, just picking at it until it looks the way I want it to look. I am going to blend my red back in again. Just give myself a little bit more of a glow there with the red. If you have trouble controlling the red, you can use a little bit of magic mix with it if you like. And a little bit more green. I think I'll go with my green mix number 4, and we'll put a little bit in here. You can see I'm just adding a little tiny bit at a time. You can add some of this green mix number 4 into your red areas, and it will darken your red. Green is always going to darken red. I'm back to my yellow. I want to dry rub again with a little bit of yellow right in here. I don't want to take it all the way up to the curve there. I want to pull that up just a little bit rounder and brighter. And to get an idea of how it's going to look when it's all done, I want to put a little bit of white on it now, and just to see. Sometimes you can't really tell how it's going to look until you get a little bit of a shine on it. Okay, so let's leave it at that. We're going to take a liner brush and some burnt umber, mix a little bit of green with green mix number 4 with burnt umber again, and we'll put just a little bit of a hint of definition around that stem dip, and then some straight burnt umber, which we'll put in for the stem. It's kind of rounded on the end and goes kind of narrower, a little bit more narrow as it goes into the apple, and then it's got a little white highlight on it. Okay, now it's always kind of hard to tell when you've got fuzzy edges on something how it's going to look when it's all done. So you kind of have to imagine that the grapes are going to cover it here. Remember too that as you go along you can always come back and add more lights, add more darks. You're never tied into it for good until you decide to put the varnish on it. So there's our apples for today, and next time we're going to do pears. So if you want to get your apples all finished, and you'll want to have this leaf here finished, and then we'll work on the pears. There's one here, and there's one that I've already started over on this side. Have a great day and have fun painting.